You know how everyone says Gen Z can't commit? That we job hop too much, that we can't stay in one spot for too long, that we're like obsessed with finding ourselves. I think we're just playing a little bit of a different game. I would know. As the declared career bachelorette, as someone who pivots in their career when they're just feeling like it's not the right vibe, it's not the right fit, I can't grow, I can't see myself staying there for 30 years. I've determined that we're just playing a different game. As a Gen Z, we're looking at the career playbook in a new light, and I love it. And I want to teach other people about what we're doing, why we're doing it, and what you can learn from it. Not necessarily in like a selfish way, being like, for example, every time I've left a job, I felt like I had to explain myself in so much detail, right? If a contract ended, if I felt like I couldn't grow anymore, if I felt like I wanted a new opportunity, anything like that, I had to go into so much detail to explain to my family, relationships, my previous employer as to why I was leaving. But I don't really know why. And I don't know if it's like a perfectionist in me or a people pleaser, but I couldn't just say, no, it's not a right fit. I had to explain in detail why it was happening. And I felt like it was an educational piece, right? For them, for me, for society. And that's what I want to dive into today is talking about their career playbook, how Gen Z is looking at it differently, why no one's talked about it, and what you can learn from it. And it kind of goes into a few separate pieces. So we're going to talk about job hopping, and why it's not actually flaky. It's quite strategic. How career identity matters a lot more than your job title, and where side hustles are helping us, and what you can learn from all of this. So I'm excited. It's a beautiful day, and we're going to dive right in. So let's start with like the big myth, I like to call it, is that Gen Z doesn't stay anywhere, right? I've spoken at a lot of conferences, and a lot of the things that have come up when I ask the crowd, tell me about Gen Z. And that's one of the biggest things, right? They job hop, they're not committed, they aren't loyal to a company. And I wouldn't say that Gen Z isn't loyal. I think they're just strategic. Studies have shown that the average Gen Z worker, so when we talk about Gen Z in age, I know we've touched on this before, but it's roughly between 1997 and 2012 is kind of the age range of when they were born. So anywhere between 27 years old and 15. Don't quote my math on that. I'm going to have to. Anywhere between 15 years old and 27 years old. So Gen Z is the generation that you are going to be hiring for the next 20 to 30 years, right? That age group is the people that you're going to be hiring as employers. It's the people that you're going to be working with in the workplace. So understanding them is actually really, really key. And what goes into this is that the average Gen Z worker, so 15 to 27-ish years of age, stay in a job 1 year. That is the average length that a Gen Z worker stays in a job, 1 year. I can attest to that. I know a lot of other Gen Z listeners on the podcast can also attest to this. And it's not because we can't commit. I used to think I had commitment issues, but I've actually learned that I don't. We don't have to go into too much detail with that. But I thought I had commitment issues in terms of jobs, right? I was like, how can people stay at these jobs for so long? And how can you sit there and get hired and be like, oh, yeah, I'll stay here for 30 years doing the same thing? Whew, that just gives me like anxiety, like fear, like, oh my gosh, what am I doing with my life? Why can't I stay committed to one thing for so long? But it's not commitment. It's not rooted in commitment. And what we're doing, what Gen Z looks at things differently is it's not that we don't want to stay loyal to a company. It's not that we can't commit, but it's because we're optimizing for something else. we're focusing on our career as a personal journey versus going into a job saying, I'm going to help this company. We're going into a job saying, obviously, yes, we're still going to help the company, but we want to learn and we want to grow and we want to feel aligned. I've talked about this in a few episodes before that Gen Z really likes purpose in their roles. So they're not necessarily going to go into a job just for the sake of going into a job. I've done it. It's not very fulfilling, but they want to go into a job that makes them feel something, right? Whether they're aligned with the mission of the company, whether it aligns with their values, whether they feel like they're making an impact, that purpose is key to them. And it ties into why we're optimizing our career journey, right? We want to learn, we want to grow, and we want to feel aligned. So, a lot of the time, we ask ourselves the question when we get into a job, right? And let's say we're getting close to the year mark of being there, why stay somewhere that's not serving me just to prove that I can? Why stay somewhere that's not serving me just to prove that I can? I just want to sit with that. I've experienced it, 15, 16, 17, who knows? How many times now? And what's really important about that mindset of thinking, why am I staying here if I know it's not serving me just to prove that I can? Because you start to feel those feelings of dissatisfaction, of unhappiness, of just like overall like meh, meh vibes. And I don't want you to feel that, and I don't want you to feel like you're stuck. And so when we ask ourselves that question, we normally come to the conclusion that if it's not serving me anymore, and if I can't grow anymore, I'm not going to stay here just to say that I can, just to say that, oh, I can commit, or just to say that, oh, I'll be loyal to this company. That's not quitting. That's getting that sense of clarity to understand where you're at in the moment and then pivot and then figure out what your next step is. I believe that Gen Z is probably one of the most self-aware generations to date so far. And the only reason I say this, and this is not to toot Gen Z's horn as much as I love to do so, but Gen Z is the way they are because of generations previous to them, right? We learned from our grandparents, our parents, our older siblings, and we've seen them in their careers, right? Grandparents who have worked in their job for 30 years just to retire, and then what happens after that, right? Or parents who are unhappy in their jobs, or siblings who didn't have the confidence to stand up for themselves in their positions. And all of those things have led us to really dive into what we're feeling and what we're understanding, and using that knowledge and information and past history to set ourselves up for success and understand ourselves. We also have we were born into the generation of technology. There is information at our fingertips constantly. If we have a question, we can Google it, ChatGPT it, and we'll have an answer within seconds. And other generations previous to us did not have that. So that's why I say that Gen Z is this really like self-aware generation, because we have the tools and resources at our fingertips, but we also have the knowledge and previous history that we've learned from those before us. Now, while older generations have always been rewarded for staying loyal or for tenure, right? I remember one job I had, they were talking about their awards that they do every year, and I was like, awards, like this is fun. It's like a little bit of recognition. Like some people really love to, strive towards those awards. And I was like, oh, what kind of awards do they have? Long service. That was it. That was the only award that this company offered, and it was just because you stayed in the job long enough. And I had been there not even 2 years, and I thought to myself, that's not something I want to strive towards, right? Why can't we have awards for other pieces that are not solely focused on tenure? And I will say too that while older generations obviously were rewarded for tenure. They weren't always, right? Yes, if you hit your 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35 year service awards, you definitely like would get maybe an award, maybe a certificate. You would maybe get a gift, more vacation, more pay. Maybe that wasn't always the case. So I don't want to completely group that in there. But we've also seen generations, grandparents, I mean, that have retired from a company, worked there for 30 years, and then their job was replaced within like a week, right? So that doesn't make a person feel very good. Obviously, that's the life cycle of running a business and hiring and retirement and all those things. But generally speaking, older generations were recognized for their tenure, for their loyalty, for their dedication to a company. Gen Z, on the other hand, I'm hoping that we will be rewarded for our adaptability. Adaptability is a word that I came across in 2014, 2015. No, not those years. That's when I graduated high school in 2019, 2020, when I was getting ready to graduate university. And how I came across this was I was in the co op program at the University of Guelph. I loved the school, I loved the co op program, and it was a really great experience. I had sat down with my co op coordinator and I came to him with my resume and I said, "Sir, I have this resume that has African Lion Safari, the Canada Revenue Agency, and an accounting firm. Oh, and tourism. Who in the world is going to take this resume seriously? Because I'm not." I sat there and I said, they're going to think that I don't know what industry I want to be in, that I don't know what I'm doing with my life. Why would they want to hire me outside of this? And he told me the theory of flipping the script, right? Instead of looking at it just one way, flip the script. And so he said, it's not that you've had too many jobs, it's that you're adaptable. And I was like, explain, please. He said, you can thrive in any one of those environments, right? You can work for a government organization, you can work in tourism, you can work at a safari, you can work at an accounting firm and still thrive, right? You can still do all of those positions. And I thought to myself, oh, he said, you're versatile, right? You have all of these transferable skills from all these different places that any company would be lucky to have. And I was like, oh, mind blown, right? But it was because of that conversation that's when I started to look at my work experience a lot differently. I was adaptable, I was versatile, I was well-rounded. So I started using those words in my skills section on my resume because I was like, oh, it's not that I can't commit to one industry, it's that I can do any industry and thrive. We'll use thrive in it's a general term. Out of all those positions, I think we could take the accounting firm off of there and say I thrived there, because I think I was like maybe 2 weeks into the job, and I emailed my co-op coordinator being like, can I quit? And he said no, unless you want to lose your spot in the co-op program. So then I continued, but I won't say I thrived there. Gen Z, I hope, is going to be rewarded for their adaptability, right? With the economy, technology, work culture, these have all shifted significantly in the last, since we entered the workforce, right? Since the elder Gen Z have entered the workforce. And that means that the career approach has to change as well, right? We can't do the same things that generations previous to us have always done because they don't work the same. The economy has changed, work culture has changed, technology has changed significantly. So we have to be able to adapt to those, and we have to be able to adapt our strategy as to how we approach our career. Hence, job hopping, hence being adaptable, hence trying new things, learning new skills. And it's all about collecting those skills and experiences and building connections that are going to help us create a portfolio versus a career ladder, right? Instead of just having one direction going up, I have to giggle every time I say One Direction. This is a total sidebar and so unnecessary, but if anyone else was a huge One Direction fan, hit me up. It's a great era and I miss it. And every time I say One Direction in any context, my mind spirals. Moving on. We want to be able to not just focus on going up one ladder with one company. We want to be able to build ourselves into being a portfolio. How we do that goes into the next topic of building a career identity, right? Gen Z has to do things differently. We can't just work for one company in one industry and expect to have the same success that those previous to us have. We have to build ourselves up. And how we do that is not just defining ourselves by what's on our LinkedIn profile, by what's on our business card, by the first work experience on our resume, right? There's a shift from what do you do, right? Asking that question in networking or in an interview, not just what do you do, but what are you building? What do you care about? What's your passion? What's your purpose? What are you working towards? What are your goals? How are you looking at your career journey differently than just focusing on one single thing? And I will say, focusing on one single thing is completely fine. If that's like your one goal, your one passion, and that's what you want to work towards, that is absolutely okay. There is no right or wrong way to approach the career playbook. It's your playbook. It's going to look different for everyone. This is a more of like a roadmap of what Gen Z is doing now, right? Where we're at right now in October of 2025. This is the research that shows what Gen Z is doing as a general instruction, as a general example, a general experiment. This is where we're at. So a lot of people are crafting their careers around their values, their passions, their personalities, and they're having a lot more fun. Gen Z is in an era where there are a lot of opportunities out there, like a lot. Like there are jobs that I know my grandparents would sit there and say, do sit there and say, how do people make money off of this? How do people make money doing this, right? How is that a job? How are people getting paid to do those types of things? And it's entertaining because I swear everywhere I turn, there's a new business happening. There is a new way that people are looking at doing things and they're starting a business and running with it. And I love it. And I love the creativity and the innovation and how creative people are being. And growing up with watching YouTubers, growing up with, and not even growing up, just living right now in the world of content creation and social media and podcasts. And there are so many avenues for you to create revenue that people are thinking, I can focus on what I'm passionate about or what I value, and I can either create my own thing, which we'll talk about next, or I can find a company that aligns with me. And that's really exciting to be able to do something that gives you that sense of purpose and make money doing it. It's kind of like it's a good vibe. It's a good vibe. The other piece to this that we've talked about in last episode is that the title, like your job title, your title on your resume, anything like that, it's not the story anymore. It's the work that you're actually doing, right? It's all the bullet points that are in that work experience that are going to build that career identity for you, build that portfolio to get you to where you want to be. So we're experimenting. We're experimenting with career identity. And we're not being, what do I want to say? We're not being indecisive. We're being decisive. We're saying, this is where I'm going, this is what I'm doing, and I like it. And once I'm done liking it, or once it doesn't fit anymore, I'm going to make another decision and I'm going to go for it. There's no hesitation, I guess. I mean, there's some hesitation, but we always find the next step, no matter what. As we'll have the breakdowns, we'll have the questionable moments of what am I doing with my life? And am I having a quarter life crisis at 27 and all those things? But we do end up making a decision. We know that we're not stuck. And then we make a decision and we move on. And one of those decisions for some people is going towards those side hustles, freelancing, focusing on your passions to A, do something that you love to do, but B, also help build your credibility as a person, as a worker, as an employee. People are turning to, freelancing, consulting, content creation, podcasts. These are all ways that Gen Z is testing ideas. They're building their confidence, they're growing their skills, right? Because they're finding that traditional workplaces are not always offering those types of opportunities. When you're hired for a job, you give them your resume, they bring you in for an interview, you do the questions, they say you're hired, fantastic, moving on, you start in your job. Your purpose in that job is to do your job, right? They didn't hire you to branch off and do these other things unless you're like a consultant type of role, right? Where you can kind of create your own things, mandates, all those types of things. But what it is about for Gen Z is saying, yes, this is a job that's going to make me money and I'm going to come in and do my job. But if I can find ways to do things on the side, to, start my morning like this or do like something like this in the evening, um, they're going to do it, right? Because while the traditional workplace isn't offering them those opportunities, they're making it for themselves. And I think it's really fun. And I think it's cool. And that's how this business started, right? As a side hustle of working towards paying off my student debt, while also doing something that I love to do, that I've always been passionate about. Side hustles are kind of like the new internships, right? We still have internships, we still have co-op jobs, but side hustles are the way that Gen Z can do it without, being tied to like a school program. And it helps them learn more about themselves. It helps them to build skills about building, about starting a business, about starting a side hustle, about, just building their portfolio. And maybe it's a little bit tied to proving themselves, proving themselves to others, to potential employers, to their family, to society. Gen Z is the generation of saying, we want to show initiative, we want to show that we're adaptable, and we want to show that we can build something from scratch and go with it, right? We have that entrepreneurial mindset. And these are things, and I say this with a laugh, these are things that employers should love. If you're an employer and you are listening to this, if you are hiring a Gen Z or really any individual that has shown initiative, that has adaptability, that maybe they run their own business, maybe they have that entrepreneurial spirit, maybe they, whether it was starting a lemonade stand or whether it was growing a full-time speaking business, speaking gig business, they're a public speaker, anything like that, those are skills that you should love, because though they have drive, they have passion, they have values that they stick to. And that, if I was hiring someone, and I've said this time and time again, when I'm hiring someone for one of my clients, if I ever hire for myself, where was I going with this? Oh, I value your experience, your transferable skills way more than your education, way more than your certifications. Yes, there are some roles where you need to have certain certifications and certain education levels. I'm not discrediting that, but if I can hire someone who is adaptable, who has shown initiative, who has that entrepreneurial mindset, I'm going to prefer to hire someone like that versus someone else who doesn't have those transferable skills or just has education, anything like that, because I know they've got drive. I know that they've got that mindset to say, I know what I want to do. Here's how I can help with this. And this is where I see this going. And I love it. Love it. So you should love it too. To kind of like summarize this in a good way, Not that this hasn't been good. To summarize this in general, what I want you to know, whether you're a Gen Z, whether you are an older generation, whether you are an employer, I want you to understand that the Gen Z Career Playbook that no one told you about, but I'm telling you about now, is summarized in a few points. Loyalty looks a heck of a lot different now. Being loyal to a company is less about the time served there and more about the trust, the respect, and the mutual growth that you get from it, right? As a Gen Z employee going in, we're learning and growing being in that position. And as an employer, you are learning and growing with them because you're understanding them. I hope you're asking questions, you're understanding them. And that to me is loyalty, not necessarily related to tenure, right? Or how long you've been there. So loyalty looks different now. Gen Z wants transparency, feedback, and purpose, right? We are very transparent about our work experience. We are really focused on getting feedback so that we can learn and grow and be adaptable. And we want to have that purpose in our role. So it's Gen Z generation is not afraid to ask the question why. And I want you to not be afraid to give them the direct answer. Don't beat around the bush. Don't make up some answer and don't lie. If a Gen Z or really anyone asks you the question why, I do it all the time. I like to say I'm a little toddler who like always asks. Someone gives an example and I just say why. And then they ask another question and I just go why because I want to get deeper and deeper and deeper into the root of the issue. But the only way that happens is asking the question why and making sure I get a direct answer out of it. And if your direct answer is, why is this done the way it is? And your answer is because it's always been done that way, that's okay. It's okay because you're recognizing that the reason why you're doing it is because it's always been done that way. But that doesn't mean that that's the end, right? That's not the final answer because you can learn and understand that there's so much more opportunity if you pivot, if you are transparent, if you take people's feedback and use it into helping you get to where the company could be a lot better, especially in this day and age. Loyalty looks different now. Gen Z wants transparency, feedback, and purpose, and they're not afraid to ask the question why. Flexibility, this is a key one because I just had a recent experience with this. Flexibility is not a perk. Flexibility in a job is not a perp. It's not a perp. It's not a perk. It is the baseline. This is flexibility. This is where a lot of businesses are, but this is the baseline. And this is where your company could be if they recognize that this is the baseline. Companies that embrace flexibility, creativity, individuality, well-being, all of those things, if they put that at their baseline, they will attract and keep fantastic talent. I said it. That's it. There is no explanation needed because this is it. This is 2025 and this is Gen Z, the generation that you are hiring for the next 20, 30 years. So flexibility, creativity, individuality, well-being, that's your baseline. That is your baseline and that's how you're going to attract and keep great talent and that's how your business is going to survive over the next 20, 30, 50 years. And as a comforting little side note, be curious. Be curious, be open, don't be critical. Do not be critical because what do you gain from that? What do you gain from sitting there and saying, Gen Z doesn't want to work, Gen Z job hops, Gen Z is lazy, Gen Z, doesn't stay late, Gen Z. If you are constantly being critical about this generation, you're not going to get anywhere and you're just going to continue to have that negative interaction with them. And so I want you to be curious. Be curious, and stop being so critical because even though when you started in the workplace, you felt like you were being judged and you felt people were being critical towards you, don't let that continue on for these generations moving forward. Be curious, ask questions, be transparent, and help them feel comfortable and focus on that baseline. When I was writing all of this down, all my notes for this podcast, I wanted to think, how can I help other generations understand Gen Z? And how can I make them, be curious and not critical? And how can I, frame this in a way that people would understand? And so I want you to ask the question to yourself. What do they, as in Gen Z, what do they know that we forgot? Because I know at some point you knew this. I know at some point that you felt the same way in your career, and whether you forgot it, whether it was forced upon you, what do they know that you forgot? And just ask yourself that every so often. If you're starting to feel critical, if you're starting to feel defeated, trying to understand this generation, just ask yourself that. Ask yourself that. Ask your Gen Z employee that. Ask your Gen Z coworker that. Ask me that. What do they know that we forgot? And I think you're going to get a lot of clarity from that. This has been a fun episode. I'm having a blast. I hope you are too. I've definitely lost my spark a little bit. I don't know if I just taking the summer off to embrace summer. I forgot how to record episodes. I felt like things were being forced. So I had to break it down and go right back to the basics. What is Gen Z about? What is Gen Z about? What is your Gen Z coworker about? What do I want people to learn and understand? Why did I start this business? And now that I've broken all that down, I get to do a really fun episode like this, right? The Gen Z Career Playbook that no one told you about. What is Gen Z? Who are they? What are the studies that are backing this up? I'm going to have all of that in the show notes. And Gen Z is not lost, right? We're not lost, even though we feel like it sometimes. We're not lost. We're intentional. We are intentional. We are recognizing that this is the journey that we're on. We're trying to embrace the journey every step of the way, and we're going to be intentional with our actions. We are not scared of change. We are just done settling for work that doesn't fit the life that we want. And don't ever forget to ask yourself that question. What does Gen Z know that I forgot? Just ask it. Don't be afraid. Don't be scared. Be curious and lean into it. As always, work is just a part of your story. Don't forget to live the rest. I'll talk to you next time.